Welcome back to Henry Harrison's Entrepreneurs Business and Finance podcast, featuring cybersecurity expert Robert Siciliano. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Enjoy the show.
I want to welcome Robert Siciliano to the show. And he helped me pronounce that word as a non-Italian. So thank you for that. The Henry Harrison Show, Entrepreneurs, Business, and Finance. Thank you for coming on. Robert is an expert in quite a lot of things, but probably first and foremost, cybersecurity. Has a very interesting story and some very practical insights for us, with more to come if you follow him or engage with him later. So let's get right to it. Hello, Robert.
Hey, thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Yes. If you want to, why don't you talk about what you're doing right now to help people? You've got a bunch of initials and accreditations, and there's a whole world out there that you are helping. You're a repeat entrepreneur. You've had many employees, different employees over the years. And what are you up to now?
For 40 years, 30 years professionally, I've been engaged in the process of what we call security awareness training. Okay. And security awareness training is essentially going into businesses and setting up employees so that they can effectively recognize and manage risk, which is an ongoing process. Security is 24/7, 365. As they say, security never sleeps. Security is a journey. It's not necessarily a destination. And all of that is due to the fact that bad actors, they always have been, they are, and they're always seeking their next mark, their next victim. And so we have to be on alert pretty much all the time. And being on alert isn't something that most humans want to do. Okay. So my job is to get them in a frame of mind that recognizing risk is an easy thing for them, so that they see it as something that they want to do, and they truly want to do it by the time we're done working together. And my ultimate job is so that the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, their job is easier because their employees become part of the solution versus part of the problem.
Oh, that's terrific. And I see on your bio that you do public speaking, you do consulting, you actually have a couple companies still. Why don't you elaborate on and all these certifications as well? You want to elaborate on that a little bit? I see Protect Now. I see Safar.me, FAR.me.
Yes.
And active shooter preparedness. It's pretty cool.
I've been speaking professionally for all of my adult life, ever since my early 20s. I am a certified speaking professional, certified in cybersocial identity and personal protection, and I'm a certified identity theft risk management specialist. Yeah, doing what I do professionally, it all started for me 30 something years ago. I owned my first computer back in 1995 to manage my small business. Then and now, I speak to multiple businesses, whether it's construction or real estate or manufacturing or finance or healthcare. Back then and now, I also speak to real estate because real estate agents in the US occasionally are accosted, assaulted, and occasionally murdered. And being a high risk profession, they require a certain level of understanding and recognizing risks in their profession. So even now, I still speak to them in that regard. And back then, in the mid 90s, I bought my first computer to manage that small business, which I still have today. And after about a month of being connected to the internet in 95, I was hacked. Like in 1995, I bought an IBM PS1 Consultant, which is the make and the model of a Windows 3.0 machine that had a 150 megabyte hard drive. I had to buy an additional card to install inside the computer so I could connect to dial-up internet, so I could connect to AOL. And when I did that, after about a month, I lost about $3,000 via credit card fraud via my point of sale on the computer. And as awful as it was, and as much money as I lost, and as upset as I was enamored by how they did what they did. When I talked to my bank and credit card company about it, they were like, yeah, this is a new thing for us too, back in the mid 90s. And I wanted to understand how they did it. And I reverse engineered their process to understand like how they chose me and how they got in and how they did what they did. Back then and now, my business has always been about personal security as it pertains to violence and theft prevention. And so violence and theft prevention traditionally is in the physical world. But what's more theft prevention today than information security and your data being hacked? So that's really all evolved over time. And once I understood how they did what they did, I started to see that this is becoming a real problem. And back in the late 90s, municipalities all over the country started posting our personal information online because it was like a very normal thing to do. Most of us all had our social security numbers on our driver's licenses. It was on all kinds of applications, and it still is in a lot of places. And when the municipalities started to post those socials, identity theft started to become a real problem. And I was right there. I saw it all taking place. And so I started to speak about it, not just to the real estate agents, but to the media. So over the years, I've done pretty much everything, like all the morning shows, Good Morning America, Today's Show, CBS Early Show. I did Howard Stern a couple of times, ABC Nightly
That out.
News.
Yeah, it's amazing, all the shows and all the places. I was going to read the list. It's too long to read. Forbes, New York Times, quoted in these magazines, been on Merrill Lynch, Honeywell, you name it, speakings, quoted. That's one reason we're glad to have you.
I've lived a colorful life. And over the years, I've seen it all, been there, done that in regards to hackers and criminals. And what I've come to learn is that like 97% of all the people that you and I will ever come in contact with, 97% are good in their heart of hearts. They're good natured. They mean no harm, essentially, right? But what I've also come to understand is that about 3% of women and as much as 6% of men, the medical communities would essentially diagnose them as sociopath or psychopath. And they are essentially the hardcore narcissists that live amongst us that experience no empathy, sympathy, guilt, or remorse. These are those who truly have no shame. And many of them would be considered human predators. That these are men and women that they seek out you and I as their natural mark. And like I hear all the time, like if these criminals, if they could just take what they know and use it for good, that they could solve cancer. And I'm like, yeah, no, they could care less about that. They are predators by their nature. And so hitting, hurting, harming, stealing, taking from others is what their version of normal actually is. And there always has been, there is, and there always will be this criminal element out there. And our job as the 97% is to become tougher targets. And most people today truly resist that. And when I say resist it, meaning like they don't actually understand that 3%. They don't understand that they are always looking for their next victim. And they don't generally want to believe that they would ever be chosen as their next victim. So we kind of function in a form of denial. We do nothing about it. And we don't want to think these bad things can happen to us, which is kind of why I still have a job, because humans just by default resist security. And I'm happy to speak to all of that.
And let's talk about some of the practical things that you can do. And let's also talk about the severity of what it can mean. You mentioned violence. I think that's relatively self-explanatory. We see it on the news. It's awful. You don't want to imagine it happening to you or anyone. But I just, crazy enough, earlier today, ran into a friend of mine who's a successful entrepreneur, business owner, has been for years, and has multiple businesses he owns. And he was just hacked by, I'm not going to say the name, but a major international ransomware hacking agency. And he's had the FBI involved. He's hired cybersecurity, but it's essentially too late. They're telling him how to get out of it, but he's going to have to pay a large amount of money and go through this incredibly difficult process. And that's all I know, except he looked really was upset.
Oh, yeah. It's
So
brutal when this happens. And this happens for a number of different reasons, primarily because obviously we're not engaging in many of us basic 101 security measures. So when I'm generally hired by a chief information security officer, by like a company C-suite, CIO, CTO, and so forth, they bring me in because while they're already providing some level of security awareness training in the form of what we call phishing simulation training. And phishing simulation training is like a compliance regulatory training that it's there to show due diligence within the corporate environment so that if something does go wrong and the attorneys general come knocking and say, okay, we are regulators and we're going to sue you, fine you, unless you can show that you did everything you were supposed to do to prevent this from happening. And that's what phishing simulation training ultimately is there for. It's compliance and regulatory check the box, right? But it doesn't necessarily move the needle when it comes to actually securing the enterprise. And so when I'm hired, they bring me in because they've said, okay, we've kind of reached a threshold. While our metrics are good regarding phishing simulation training, we know we can do better. How can we do better? We just want our people to care about security. So when they bring me in, I walk into the room, they introduce me, and let's just say there's 100 people sitting in front of me, right? There's 100 people sitting in front of me looking at me, basically with a scowl on their face, with their arms crossed, and they're like saying to themselves, okay, security guy, what are you going to tell me that I don't already know? And I got to get back to work. So let's make this quick. And so what I generally do is I start asking them questions. I engage them in a dialogue. And that dialogue revolves around how many of you can honestly say, and this is a true question, and this goes to the audience too, how many of you can honestly say that you're using a different passcode for each of your critical accounts? In other words, you're not using the same passcode twice. How many of you can honestly say that? And when I speak in front of a live audience, if out of 100 people, if I get 10 people to raise their hand that they're using a different passcode, that's a lot, which means 90% are not changing up their passcodes, that they're all using the same passcode across multiple accounts, which is brutal. Because what most people don't truly understand is that today, right now, there's about 300 billion of our records, name, addresses, socials, account numbers, passwords on the dark web. 300 billion of our credentials are on the dark web right now. About 20 billion of those credentials are in fact passwords. Okay. And so when 90% of the public is using the same passcode across multiple accounts, what people don't really truly understand is that bad actors, they don't necessarily hack any longer. They just log in. So I don't know what happened to your friend, but it's possible that he might have been using the same passcode across multiple accounts, and they just logged in to his machine, to his critical accounts. And once that happens, it's game over. That's when they extort you, right? And the next question I asked them is, how many of you are using a password manager? And a password manager is a software program that's been around for 20 plus years that is designed to facilitate using a different passcode across multiple accounts. I've been using a password manager for 22 years. And I don't use the same passcode twice. And I don't even know my passwords. My password manager knows them. I can see them. I can look them up. I can pull them up. But in my head, I don't remember them. I don't need to remember them because my password manager does that for me. So if 10% out of 100 people raise their hand, that's a lot. So people using the same passcode across multiple accounts, they're not using a password manager. And then the next question is, how many of you are using two-factor authentication for all your critical accounts, including email, personally and professionally? If I get 15% of the room to raise their hand, that's a lot, which means 85 to 90% of all your employees, and maybe even many of the people on this podcast listening, watching, are engaged in very poor cyber hygiene. And that is exactly what organized criminals want you to be doing. Essentially, they want you to be doing nothing. They do not want you to engage in basic one-on-one security like what I just spoke of. And they know that 90% of the general population, including many small businesses, aren't doing the basics, which is extremely lucrative. And further, what most people don't understand is that cybercrime is looking to be about a $12.2 trillion business by 2031. $12.2 trillion by 2031. Right now, it's looking as if the organized fraud cybercrime trade has eclipsed the illicit drug trade. It's already like a $500 billion a year industry. And that's why it's so lucrative, because we're not doing anything to protect ourselves. Your friend, my guess is he did a bunch of things, but apparently not enough. And it's that not enough that they want you to do. And people hear this, like, criminal hackers, they're so sophisticated. There's nothing that I can do. I'm just going to throw my hands up in the air and give up. I don't know that's a good strategy. And when people adopt that strategy, they're adopting fatalism. And fatalism is not how we approach security.
No, we don't want to have fatalism. That idea of the podcast here is to educate people so that they can do a better job, and that's helpful. Do you have any? I guess it's hard to measure in some cases success stories, 'cause failure, but getting people to take adequate steps in the companies that you go to work with would be. How do you measure that?
So part of this process is about getting people essentially to recognize risk. And that's a really easy process. Like I tell everybody, I can make you the top 10% of secure Americans. Literally, top 10%. And how do you go about that? Number one, password manager. Start with that, right? Because the password manager facilitates having a different passcode across all your multiple accounts. So between password manager, changing up your passcodes, and then two-factor authentication, you're already in the top 10% because 90% of the population isn't doing those three basic things. And then from there, if you want to go about do-it-yourself security, which is not a bad thing, depending on the size and scope of your organization, updating your hardware. So like right now, I'm on a 2025 Mac with an M4 chip. There's something newer, but this is a relatively new device that I just got back in December. And this is the most secure operating system and device that I could possess in this day and age that's going to facilitate an updated operating system, updated hardware, updated software, so that I become a tougher target. Beyond that, many people are using older 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old devices, which means old hardware, old chips, old motherboards, old software, which facilitates fraud. Because if you're still on Windows 10, I don't even know if that's even supported by Microsoft any longer. So old hardware supports only old software. So updating your hardware means you're updating your software. So make those investments in your technology, which are investments in your business. And then from there, update your browser and update everything else. And then the basics like Wi-Fi, right? When you're out and about, you should be utilizing what's called a VPN, a virtual private network, which is a software program that when you're on free open Wi-Fi at the airport, the hotel, the resort, and so forth, the conference room, that your Wi-Fi is encrypted on that free Wi-Fi connection. Using VPNs, virtual private networks, prevents criminals in the area from sniffing out your data on that free Wi-Fi. You will never catch me at an airport on free Wi-Fi without my VPN. These are basic software programs that might cost $5 a month, $60 a year that anybody can adopt. And it's just a matter of launching it once you connect to, say, Boston Logan Airport Wi-Fi, and you're good. These basic strategies are all anybody needs to do, but most people don't even think they need it to begin with. And when I get in front of my audiences, I ask them a bunch of serious questions revolving around what their current security practices are. And one of the basic questions I ask people is, how many of you actually have a home security system? Which is the fundamentals of personal protection. It's where you sleep, right? I ask, how many of you have a home security system? If I get 10%, maybe 15% of the room to raise their hand, that's a lot, right? 85% of the general public doesn't have a home security system. And they say to them, okay, did you know that every year in America, between 1.5 million and 2 million homes are burglarized every single year? That means in the next 10 years, that's like 15 to 20 million homes burglarized in the next decade. And I say, okay, so why don't you have the home security system? And people begin to raise their hands. And one of the most common answers I get is, we don't have a home security system because we have insurance. As if insurance is going to protect you and your physical being at 3 a.m. Kind of a silly answer, but that's what people answer. And then the next answer is, we don't have a home security system because my husband says, if they're going to break in, they're going to break in. What are we going to do? He's justifying not making that installation because of fatalism, that the burglars are too powerful for him. I say to that wife, listen, divorce that guy. He's no good. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I got 2 daughters. I got a honey. I'm doing everything I can to protect my family. I'm not going to give up and go, oh, the burglar's got an upper hand. Good luck, honey. You're on your own. Really? But that's the real answers that I get from people. But the most common answer that I get when it comes to why we don't have a home security system is, we don't have a home security system because I don't want to live like that. I don't want to have to worry. I don't want to live in fear, people say to me. And I'm like, whoa, truly? And then I say, okay, so I'm a guy, and this is true. I have 20 plus security cameras. Okay. So you hear this guy's got 20 plus security cameras. I've got like 6 points on my home corners, 2 to 3 cameras per point, and a few on the inside. So maybe a little excessive, but whatever. When you hear, okay, this guy's got 20 plus security cameras, what might you think people think of my disposition, my worldview? I wake up every day with 20 plus security cameras. I must be what? What do you think? What do you think they say?
I don't want to.
You
I
can
mean,
say it.
there's paranoid or something
Yeah,
like that.
paranoid. Exactly. That's what they always
Yeah,
say. When I ask
yeah.
that question in front of 100 people, I get 100 people simultaneously going, paranoid, which is kind of funny,
Mhm.
actually, because they're looking at each other. We just called him paranoid. But here's the problem with that. The problem with looking at managing risk, putting systems in place to reduce risk as a form of paranoia. Oh, he must worry. He must live in fear. He must always be looking over his shoulder. He must think that people are out to get him. With that point of view, with our perception of that's what security is, why would you ever want to engage in security practices if you think it's about worry and fear and paranoia? And that's what most people think, which is why we resist engaging in security practices. That is a reality that I've come to the conclusion over 30 to 40 years of engaging in security awareness training and meeting thousands and thousands of people over the years and asking them questions and getting their answers. Most people think in America that security is about paranoia. And as a result, we do nothing. So what happens is we say, it can't happen to me, and we function in denial. And we utilize fatalism to justify that denial because we don't want to think it's going to happen to us. And the criminal hackers, they're just too powerful anyways. But it's not going to happen to me anyways. Plus, I don't want to even be paranoid. So why bother? We throw our hands up in the air. And that is exactly what criminal hackers want you to think. It's perfect. And what they do is they make billions of dollars every single year off the back of hardworking Americans that basically don't know what to do because they don't want to believe it can happen to them in the first place and they've never made the effort. And that's unfortunate. And so once I'm hired and then I go in and I speak, what ultimately happens is I get off the platform and the employee says to me, you know something? I didn't want to be here today. I came here because my boss told me I had to come here. But you know what? I didn't think it was going to be like this. Because what this was, I talked about their own personal security, how it affects them, their own passwords, their own bank accounts, their own child's digital footprint, their own money, how they protect themselves first, which truly is what security awareness training should be. But generally in a corporate environment, it's not. And once you do that, they're like, whoa, I want more of this in my life. And so at the end of the meeting, they come up to me, they're like, this was great. I'm so glad that I came. I wish my spouse was here because he or she would have loved it, is how it should be. But most of the time it isn't.
Oh. You're a widely recognized expert, as we just talked about, quoted and been on some of the many, if not all, of the largest news organizations, publications in the country. When you were a kid, did you think you'd be a trainer, speaker, cyber expert? Did you have an entrepreneurial bend? What was your family life like that led you to this spot? Because you didn't just
So,
appear here.
yeah, when I was young, I was always industrious. And I remember my grandfather, my grandpa, saying to me at a very early age, I might have been 11 years old. I think what I had done was like as a kid, I would like back and forth on the way back and forth to school, I'd pick trash. I'd grab stuff off the side of the road, bicycles out of people's trash, whatever I could find, and I would sell it. I would find ways to sell it. And my grandfather, I remember him saying to me, Robbie is an entrepreneur. And I didn't even know what that word meant. I had to ask around. And once I heard that and he instilled that in me, it began to make sense to me. And I saw opportunities to get paid all around me. And so I've always considered myself somewhat, and I don't think that this of as a bad word, somewhat of a hustler. I've always hustled. I've always done anything and everything I could to make a buck. Always. I always had 3 jobs. I was always buying and selling stuff on the side. I was always doing something to make money. And in my early teens, actually, when I was 12 years old, something significant happened to me. I was actually, I'm 57 years old, and I'm of the generation where, when we got up in the morning, our parents opened up the door, they let us outside, and they said, okay, come back when the street lights come on, or come back for dinner. And that's what we did. We were gone 8, 10, 12 hours a day, and we'd come back home filthy, bleeding, just ragged, and then sit down to dinner. And then shower up, watch some TV, and go to bed and start all over the next day. And we survived. I don't know how we did, but we survived. And so I remember my dad would let us go into downtown Boston, get on the train, because I'm from Boston, if you haven't figured that one out. And we get off the train, and I remember me and my little brother at 12, and he was 8. And we get up to the street, and there's 5 kids at the top of the street kind of waiting for us or waiting for anybody. And they mugged me, and they beat me up, and they took all my money. And I was not prepared for that at all. And so I go home all beaten and bloodied, and my dad's like, okay, so today you were the gazelle and those boys were the lions. And he explained to me, there always has been, there is, and there always will be this predatory element out there. And your job is to become a tougher target. And he explained all that to me. Predators and their prey and sociopaths and psychopaths. And so that began to make sense to me, but not entirely. And about a year later, I was 13, and I met a girl at summer camp. She was my first crush. And so on the bus at the end of the day, as we're driving back to home, we'd sit together and hold hands and stuff. And I remember it. And I remember one day I got off at her bus stop, and we're sitting on our front stairs, and she's looking at me all solemn, and I didn't really understand what was happening. And she says to me, I think you should understand, or you should know, that my mother's boyfriend assaulted me. And I didn't know what she was talking about, but I knew it was bad based on how she said what she said. So I go home and I ask my dad, Dad, what is sex and what is rape? Because I didn't know what she was talking about. I just knew it was bad.
Horrible. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, mind you, I'm 57. Like I said, this is 45 years ago, 44 years ago. We didn't know what sex was as kids. We didn't know at 12, 13, 14 years old. It wasn't talked about. We didn't have porn. We didn't know about any of that stuff. If you knew anything, it was because you found a Playboy in the trash on the way home from school. Literally, that's how you learned about it. And so I learned about the birds with bees and sexual assault in the same conversation at 13 years old. That had a profound effect in the way I viewed the world. And being a victim of a multiple attack situation a year earlier, I began to gravitate towards professions revolving around personal protection. And so I started teaching karate, taking karate, teaching karate. That became a thing in my life. By my early 20s, I'm teaching real estate agents personal protection. And then I get hacked, right? And really not much of anything has changed in the past 30 years in regards to consumers, citizens, in regards to their recognizing risk. We don't really do much different today than we did back then. Most of us aren't locking our doors. Most of us don't have home security systems. Most of us are using the same passcode across multiple accounts. Most of us haven't taken self-defense classes and so forth, right? The bad guys, they've changed, right? What the bad guys do is they treat fraud as a business, and they make billions. But I'm here to say it doesn't have to be that easy for the bad guy. All you got to do is the basic things, and you're good.
Wow. That's powerful. Thank you for sharing that. And I know you're a best-selling author. I don't know, would you like to wrap up with something about that and also where they can reach Mr. Robert Siciliano?
Thank you, sir. So I've written 5 books, and all my books revolve around personal protection as it relates to violence and theft prevention in the physical and virtual world. I think my latest book is Identity Theft Privacy, Security Protection, and Fraud Prevention. It's a bestseller on Amazon. You can find it on Amazon. Other than that, my job is to help you and your organization tighten things up, whether it's bringing in a virtual chief information security officer to do vulnerability testings on your network to determine where you need to tighten up, or you're looking to engage in security awareness training to make sure that ransomware doesn't happen within your environment. Just touch base with me at protectnowllc.com. Again, that's protectnowllc.com. Otherwise, search Robert Siciliano and connect with me on LinkedIn, Siciliano.
Fantastic. We just had thunder here. That wasn't a audiovisual extra there. That's a wrap-up thunder. That's what the world thinks of that presentation. Boom. Good one. Well done.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, thanks a lot for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Hey, it's my absolute pleasure. I appreciate what you're doing here.
Thank you for watching Henry Harrison's Entrepreneurs, Business and Finance podcast here on YouTube. Remember to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can also search Henry Harrison Podcast on your favorite podcast platforms.